He handed her the keys to his underground empire. After surviving shootouts, brutal betrayals, and a fake marriage that turned dangerously real, the city's deadliest man gives her a choice: walk away clean or stay and rule the violent darkness by his side. You won't believe what this former innocent student decides to do when faced with a life of beautiful chaos. Is love worth losing your soul? Today, you and I are diving into the exact second a normal life gets hijacked by a massive mob debt. Picture this: freezing streetlights, dead quiet pavement, and a literal steel knife pressed right against Alara Vance's neck. Her heart is hammering. The world shrinks down to the nasty, stale smoke off the goon holding the blade. He casually whispers her dad has exactly 48 hours left. Boom. It hits hard, teaching us a brutal life lesson. Sometimes the reckless mistakes of the people we love become the heaviest chains we have to carry. This is the insane spark dragging her into the grip of a ruthless crime boss. Stick with me, guys. We are about to walk a razor-thin line between pure survival and absolute darkness. To really get why Alara is built differently, you have to see her daily grind. She is 22, barely surviving, watching her dad drink away every single penny they have. Her only escape? Burying her face in heavy, beat-up art history books. Her dad constantly roasts her for it, totally missing the plot. Those books are her only anchor since her mom bailed 6 years ago. It gives us a really solid life lesson. When the world breaks your heart, you have to find your own quiet, safe space to survive the madness. So there she was, walking home, hiding in her thoughts about old paintings, when the heavy crunch of boots hit the pavement right behind her. Instantly, the safety bubble pops. Her spine goes totally rigid. She picks up the pace, knowing deep down she is being hunted. She is doing the frantic math in her head, 30 feet to the main road. Every survival instinct is screaming at her to bolt, but then a rough voice barks out her name. The shock hits like a straight punch to the ribs, freezing her in her tracks. She turns around in slow motion. 2 massive units of mob muscle are blocking the alley. The older guy steps up, flashing brutal scars all over his jaw, while the younger one rocks this dead, psycho smile. He asks if she knows who they are. She shakes her head, totally terrified. Here is a harsh life lesson. Playing dumb never protects you from the demons your family invites to the table. The psycho kid just laughs a dry, evil laugh. He tells her that her dad definitely knows them, enjoying the show as the color completely drains from her face. The guy steps right up, invading her personal space, and drops the absolute nuke. Her dad owes them $60,000. You can literally watch the hope flatline. She knew her dad was a gambler, but she coped by pretending it was a minor habit. That insane price tag blows her denial to pieces. It drops a massive life lesson on us. Burying your head in the sand never makes the monster go away. It just lets it get huge in the dark. When she tries to play clueless, the goon casually rattles off her home address, her work schedule, and the exact bus she rides every single day. They even mock her school grades. It is a total psychological power move. They are proving they own her reality, totally ripping away her peace of mind and trapping her in their twisted game. They give her exactly 2 days to cough up the cash. She tries hard to hide her shaking hands, but these guys smell fear like blood in the water. Then they drop the absolute sickest threat, hinting that a pretty girl always has other ways to clear a massive mob tab. It is a totally disgusting reality check. In their eyes, she is not even human anymore. She is just merchandise. Once they plant that nightmare in her brain, they just turn and ghost her. Leaving her alone in that dark alley is a twisted mind game, letting her own panic do the damage. She finally drags herself back to her freezing apartment, only to find her deadbeat dad passed out on the couch. It is a bitter life lesson. The people causing your absolute worst storms are usually the ones sleeping peacefully through the rain. And naturally, let's pause and see how she processes this ultimate betrayal. The cheap television light is flickering across her dad's completely useless, sleeping face. She is mentally burying the strong, protective father he used to be, because that guy is gone, totally swallowed up by addiction. It forces a really harsh life lesson on us. The people we lean on the absolute hardest are usually the ones who let us take the worst falls. Everything inside her wants to just scream and break things. Instead, she goes ice cold. She locks the anger away and steps into the dark kitchen, realizing she has 0 options and 0 cash. Facing a literal ticking clock, her panicked brain instantly snaps to the one guy who might have an out. She thinks of Luka Duka, the quiet loner she knew back in their high school days. Here is the crazy thing about Luka. He never even wanted to be the outcast. His last name is soaked in mob blood, making people literally cross the street to avoid him. Alara was just naturally quiet, so they bonded. But while Luka is a softie at heart, he has 0 muscle to wipe out a massive mob bounty. That brutal fact forces Alara to look at the absolute final boss of the city, Luka's terrifying older brother, Ronan Vittorio Duca. Ronan is the kind of Mafia overlord whose dark reputation enters the room before he does. He literally owns human lives. This brings up a wild life lesson. Extreme desperation will push you into the arms of the exact monsters you should run from. If Luka is terrified of his own flesh and blood, Alara knows she is walking into a total nightmare. Just look at the dread on her face before making this call. Staring at the cracked phone, Alara knows she is crossing a massive red line. She is literally dialing up the devil. When Luka answers, you can hear the pure panic in his voice. She drops the stats, the alley ambush, the blades, the massive debt. Luka actually stops breathing. He begs her to back out. Knowing exactly how ruthless his brother really is, he warns her she is playing a rigged game. But here is a hard life lesson. When you are pushed totally to the edge, survival is the only thing that matters, even if it means selling your soul tomorrow just to breathe today. Luka leaves her with one absolutely chilling fact. Ronan never, ever does favors. Every single move he makes is a calculated setup to completely own you. She tells Luka that absolutely everything has a price tag. Man, it is gut-wrenching to hear her sound this broken. What we are witnessing is the foundation of a seriously dark bond before they even make eye contact. Alara is so paralyzed by the goons today that she is ignoring the Mafia kingpin waiting for her tomorrow. It teaches us a crazy life lesson. Sheer, blind panic will make you trade one dangerous cage for an even deadlier one without a second thought. Luka reluctantly agrees to set up the sit-down, but lays down the ultimate rule: no lies, no games. His brother will obliterate anyone who plays him. The call drops. Alara is just standing there in her miserable kitchen, her life gone. Across town, a mob boss is already flipping through her file, putting a hard price on her soul. At exactly 2:47 in the morning, her phone lights up the pitch-black room. One single text: a black car is coming at 8. Be ready. You and I know exactly what it is like when anxiety completely hijacks your brain at night, right? 0 peace. Around noon, her deadbeat dad finally wakes up looking like garbage. She absolutely unloads on him about the massive hit the mob put on them. You can literally watch the guy crumble. All the blood leaves his face while he stammers out the most pathetic excuses imaginable. Alara just stares right through him with dead eyes. even though her fists are clenched white. Here is the ultimate life lesson. A weak apology means absolutely nothing when your actual life is on the line. Talk is cheap, and words without brave actions are just totally useless noise. She ices her heart over and demands the truth. He spins the absolute sob story of a hardcore addict, small bets snowballing into massive losses, fueled by the delusional idea that he could win it all back. She brutally cuts through his garbage excuses, finding a twisted satisfaction when he flinches at her tone. When she drops the bomb that she is meeting a mafia boss to fix his mess, he tries to act like a dad and argue. She shuts him down instantly. It slams home a brilliant life lesson. True respect is earned, and making reckless, selfish choices totally strips away your right to lead. She orders him to stay sober and ghosts off to school. By nightfall, her dread turns into pure adrenaline as she suits up in heavy dark clothes, preparing herself for a literal gang war instead of a simple meeting. She is not trying to look cute for the mob tonight. At exactly 5 to 8, she is standing on the freezing, damp concrete. Right on the dot, this massive black sedan glides out of the shadows, dead quiet like an actual hearse. She slides into the back seat and the driver hits the gas without a single word. The inside smells like expensive leather and cold steel. It feels completely soulless. Staring out the tinted glass, she watches her rundown neighborhood fade into absolutely insane billionaire fortress estates. It delivers a really harsh life lesson. The higher you climb up the ladder of extreme wealth and raw power, the colder and more brutal the air gets. The car finally rolls through heavy iron gates and parks in front of a giant stone mansion. It looks like an unforgiving prison built for the absolute worst kind of monsters. We are jumping right into the madness, and we open not on a cozy home, but a straight-up tomb. Ara steps through massive reinforced doors, and the freezing marble foyer instantly swallows her whole. The camera catches her reflection in a gilded mirror, looking utterly terrified like a trapped animal. Suddenly, the silence shatters. A slow, punishing thud of heavy boots echoes, and Ronan Duca appears at the top of the grand stairs, the Mafia kingpin himself. He stands there like a monument of muscle, radiating a crushing violence that does not even need a blade to cut deep. Dressed in pitch black, he is a living shadow, built to extinguish hope. Life teaches us a very chilling lesson here. The real monsters rarely hide under the bed. Usually, they are the ones holding the deed to the entire estate. Faint ink bleeds across his forearms, the brutal branding of a man who entirely owns the underground. Ronan does not bother with a polite greeting. He simply watches from above, breaking her down into cold risks. He already knows she is tied to his brother, Luca, moving down the stairs with the terrifying patience of a starving wolf. He orders her to speak. Ara swallows the panic rising in her throat and hands him the ugly truth. She lays out the extortion, her father's massive debt, and the measly 48 hours she has left to survive. She forces the words out without shedding a single tear. In response, Ronan gives absolutely nothing. He just lets the dead quiet stretch out, hunting for any sign of weakness. Remember this simple truth. In a battle of wills, silence is always the sharpest weapon you can draw. $60,000. He lets the words drop like heavy stones, forcing Ara to say the exact number out loud and literally beg for salvation. Then, the whole dynamic violently shifts. He demands a legit reason for his charity. When she brings up Luca's gentle heart, Ronan's jaw locks tight. He views his brother's empathy as a terminal disease, declaring that his massive empire runs on cold transactions alone. Ara's hands start trembling. Stripped of all her pride, she admits she has nothing left but the violent death waiting for her. Ronan's dark eyes narrow. He measures her intellect, her empty bank accounts, and the absolute purity of her despair. Turning his back, he knows she is entirely ready to be molded. We all eventually learn this simple, painful lesson. Raw desperation is the exact currency predators love to collect. A single, commanding flick of his wrist pulls her right into his shadowed office. The room centers on a massive dark wood desk. Ronan pours amber liquor into a heavy glass and slides it toward her. She sits there totally rigid, refusing the drink. Looming over her, he casually promises he can erase her entire nightmare with just one phone call. A cruel rush of hope hits her veins, but he kills it instantly. In his brutal economy, absolutely nothing comes free. When she insists she has nothing to give, he just tilts his head. He does not want her money. He wants a full stage play. To drag his bloody empire into legitimate high society, he needs the perfect illusion of a stable, loving home. It is a sobering lesson we must all accept. The most dangerous monsters out there are always the ones obsessed with looking like perfect gentlemen. You and I need to look closely here, because this is exactly where the steel trap snaps completely straight. He demands a fake fiancée. With bone-chilling calm, he lays out the twisted rules. She will smile, play house, and force the public to believe they are deeply in love. When she gasps at the sheer insanity of it, he points at the door, casually reminding her of the violent mobsters waiting outside. Just 1 year, he promises, and then a totally clean exit. The crushing weight of reality forces her trembling hand to finally swallow the burning liquor. Eyes watering, she asks why he chose her. His answer lacks any human warmth whatsoever. She is totally alone, unnoticed by society. Life teaches us a simple lesson. Making yourself invisible does not hide you from the wolves. It just makes you way easier to drag into the pitch black. Ronan slowly circles the desk, cutting the distance until he dominates the very air she breathes. He strips away any romantic illusion. This is simply a brutal trade. Every primal instinct in her body screams to run, but her mind coldly processes the hard facts. The loan sharks will never stop, and her father cannot save himself. She is completely cornered. When she asks about her dad, Ronan guarantees total debt forgiveness and a secure facility for him. The true cost? Her entire freedom. She must move into this freezing fortress today, wear a permanent painted smile, and ignore the blood staining his hands. It brings us to a profound, simple lesson in life. We will often walk willingly into our very own locked cages, just to keep the people we deeply love from burning to the ground. The camera drifts across the room, lingering on priceless artifacts Ara could never touch without signing her literal soul away. Every single nerve in her body is a raw alarm, begging her to sprint into the night. But she is way too busy doing the brutal math of survival. Running only buys a few miserable days before she ends up buried in the ground. The dead silence stretches agonizing and thick until she forces one totally defeated word from her lips. But bosses like Ronan never settle for half measures. He demands absolute submission. He forces her to declare it out loud, sealing her dark fate right into the cold air. I will be your fiancé. There is a vital, simple lesson in this quiet surrender. Sometimes the absolute highest price we ever have to pay to stay alive is the total sacrifice of our personal freedom. Let us look closely here, because his psychological control is terrifyingly subtle. Ronan casually mentions that the thugs hunting her are already handled, instantly chaining her to an enormous, invisible debt. When Ara nervously asks about the loan shark, Ronan's face shifts into a freezing, dead smile. He quietly advises her to never question his brutal methods again. The blood totally drains from her cheeks. He discusses lethal violence like it is a casual business deal. Without missing a single beat, he assigns her a massive room in the East Wing. When she weakly protests staying the night, his eyes turn straight to stone, erasing her free will in a single glance. It serves a chilling, simple life lesson. True power is never politely negotiated. It is taken from you by force until you completely forget you ever had a choice. Ronan delivers his final command, turning the lock on her twisted new reality. She is strictly forbidden to leave. She is officially his property now. Left totally alone in the sprawling mansion, Ara grips a heavy chair, fighting just to pull oxygen into her lungs. Her phone suddenly lights up with a text from Luca. Her fingers shake uncontrollably as she replies, confessing she just sold her soul to keep breathing. We can practically feel the crushing weight of Luca's despair, trapped outside while she is dragged under. Pressing her forehead against the freezing window pane, Ara stares out at the city lights. She forces herself to call this a victory, using her father's safety to justify her complete submission. It reveals a tragic, simple life lesson. The mind will gladly construct the most beautiful lies, just to keep our heavy hearts beating. A massive psychological conflict takes root deep in her chest as the hours drag on. Stick with me, because this is where it gets heavy. Another message glows from Luca, warning that Ronan never loses a game he decides to play. Those words hammer the final nail into her helpless state. She stands frozen in the dark, tethered to a ruthless predator. The tragic death of the girl she used to be has officially begun. Will she even recognize her own reflection in a year? When dawn finally breaks, she is struck by a new, suffocating weapon. The massive estate is creepily quiet. This absolute silence feels exactly like drowning, a jarring contrast to the chaotic noise of her past. It brings us to a harsh, simple life lesson. True isolation does not begin when the iron door locks. It starts the very second you lose the sound of freedom. The dead air of the bedroom acts like a vacuum, pulling pure panic straight into her throat. For one fleeting second of waking amnesia, she actually feels safe. Then her eyes focus on the vaulted ceiling, and the nightmare crashes back down hard. We can perfectly see the cold mechanics of her invisible cage. The expensive silk curtains and pristine sheets are definitely not gifts of comfort. They are highly calculated displays of Ronan's Mafia power. This is just an elegant holding cell. Checking her phone, she finds missed calls from Luca, a desperate man locked on the outside. Below sits a totally sterile text from Ronan, coldly dictating her wardrobe and daily schedule. There is a simple, painful life lesson in this coldness. When you replace human empathy with strict rules, you do not just control a person. You slowly erase them entirely. The deliberate chill in the massive bedroom is perfectly designed to keep her nerves completely frayed. She pulls the closet doors open, only to be hit by a deeply invasive violation. Row after row of expensive designer clothing hangs in rigid perfection, with every piece already tailored to her exact measurements. A sickening wave of disgust washes right over her. He had been tracking her long before she ever stepped foot into his office. Desperate to hold on to a fragment of her soul, she ignores the expensive dresses and grabs her own worn-out jeans. She clings to the tragic delusion that she can just play this fake role until a magic door opens up. But a profound, simple life lesson waits inside this closet. The most inescapable prisons on earth do not need iron bars. They simply smother your dying hope under layers of beautiful, heavy silk. Step right into this absolute nightmare with me. We have our girl Ara walking down these massive, creepy stairs, looking like she just spawned into the wrong video game. The smell of bitter coffee drags her barefoot into a freezing kitchen where she meets Teresa. Bro, this housekeeper is straight up built like a prison warden. Zero smiles, just cold, hard orders. Teresa is out here demanding scrambled eggs and wheat toast on the dot at 8 for Mr. Duca. Ara tries to flex a little rebellion and asks for her normal breakfast, but Teresa just gives her that dead NPC stare. It honestly hits hard with a quick reality check. When you willingly step into someone else's cage, you do not get to keep your freedom. The conditioning is already in full swing, and things are looking totally cooked. Ara totally gives up on fighting the housekeeper and takes a massive L, sinking into a giant mahogany table that makes her look tiny. The steam is just rolling off her scalding coffee when the clock strikes 8, and boom, Ronan Duca enters the chat. This guy is rocking a dark suit and radiating pure, unadulterated boss energy. He completely ignores her. The man literally just sits there, scrolling on his phone, letting the crushing silence completely wreck her nerves. The ticking clock is just hammering the tension. Then, without even bothering to look up from his screen, Ronan drops an absolute bomb. He casually mentions that her father was dragged into the evaluation facility late last night. Real talk. The lesson here is simple. The silent treatment from a walking red flag is usually a trap. Watch how this menace plays with his food. Ara is literally shaking, begging to know if her dad is safe, and Ronan just gives the driest, most hollow response ever. He talks about strict isolation rules and calls her old man a massive burden. Ara finally snaps and goes totally off on him, screaming out of pure frustration. But let us take a closer look right here. For one split second, you catch a tiny mask on his face. This psycho is actually enjoying her rage. He loves watching her struggle. Then he leans in close and drops a terrifying whisper, telling her to fall in line or else. It leaves us with a pretty heavy lesson today. Real evil does not always scream and shout. Sometimes it just wears an expensive suit and speaks softly. Ara lets out this bitter, sarcastic laugh and completely calls him out. She looks right at this insane mansion and calls it exactly what it is, a $60,000 cage. She is still trying to fight back, but Ronan just tilts his head, watching her panic like a scientist studying a bug. He completely ignores her rage and smoothly drops his next order. They have a fancy dinner tonight, and she is wearing the exact black dress he picked out. All her arguing just bounces right off his icy stare. He walks out, the door clicks, and she is left completely alone in this massive, isolating house. She wanders into the huge library, but she cannot even focus on a single book. Honestly, the takeaway is pretty grim. The quietest, fanciest rooms are usually the ones that absolutely crush a person's spirit. Ara is just staring at this pitch black dress on her bed, and it basically looks like a funeral outfit for her old life. Suddenly, Luca bursts into the room looking totally stressed out. He grabs her for a massive hug, and the second she feels actual human warmth, her tough act shatters and she starts bawling. Luca is panicking, asking why she would ever agree to this absolute nightmare. Ara pulls back, wipes her face, and goes ice cold. She drops the heavy truth. There were some seriously dangerous dudes waiting to take her out, so she took a brutal deal with his brother just to stay breathing. It is super dark, but it hits on a wild life lesson. Sometimes surviving the absolute worst case scenario means you have to willingly shake hands with a total monster. Luca immediately starts doing a PR for his psycho brother, completely avoiding eye contact. He tries to convince her that Ronan is not actually evil, just super obsessed with controlling everything. Ara is over here, coping hard, praying this whole hostage situation is just temporary. But you and I both know that is massive copium. Luca completely shatters her delusion right then and there. He says that once Ronan drags you into his messy world, he never lets you leave. Luca knows his brother is deeply broken inside, which brings us to a super important point. Hurt people usually end up building the exact cages that trap everyone else around them. Luca looks absolutely terrified and tells her straight up that Ronan does not just hire people, he completely owns their souls until the bitter end. Ara throws her head back and tries to act tough, totally refusing to admit she is just some Mafia asset. But the incredibly creepy silence of the house just eats her words. The reality is totally sinking in. Across the room, Luca is sweating bullets, drowning in guilt, while begging her to just keep her head down. When she asks what happens if she disobeys, Luca just goes silent. That quiet is louder than a siren. Suddenly, the massive front door deadbolt slams shut, echoing through the entire house. You hear Ronan's dark voice rumbling down the hallway, and the blood instantly drains out of Luca's face. The big boss is home, and the younger brother literally bolts away like a scared rabbit. The lesson here is pretty brutal. Living in constant fear completely deletes your courage to protect anyone. The tension in this room is straight up suffocating right now. Ronan is standing there looking like a carved statue, while Luca is literally shaking. Luca tries to stand up for Ara and beg for a shred of humanity, but Ronan shuts him down with the coldest tone ever, calling this poor girl nothing but a business asset. Luca is completely shattered, but Ronan does not even blink. Instead, he drops the wildest plot twist of the entire story. He brings up Victor Salazar, a totally unhinged rival boss lurking in the background. Ronan reveals that Ara was never just paying off some family debt. She was walking blindly into a massive trap to be used as bait. Let this be a huge warning. We often think we are making free choices, but sometimes we are just getting played like pawns by someone way smarter. Hearing the name Victor Salazar absolutely wrecks Ara like a punch to the gut. Stick with me here, because the math Ronan lays out is completely twisted. He basically tells her that if he had not stepped in, she would already be sleeping with the fishes. By slapping his brand on her, he made her untouchable to the rest of the underworld. Her cage is fully locked. Luca quietly sneaks out the door, looking totally defeated. Ronan watches Ara freak out, not feeling any pity, just hyped that his shiny new asset is secured. She starts crying and accuses him of faking her dad's debt, but he coldly confirms it was 100% real the whole time. This brings up a harsh truth. When you sell out your boundaries just to feel a little bit safer, you completely give up the freedom you were trying to protect. Ara is totally frozen on the spot. She desperately tries to confront Ronan, wanting to prove she is way more than just a piece on his chessboard. She wishes she could just run away, but Bro has her totally cornered. Ronan steps up close, blocking out all the light because he is an absolute unit. He drops his voice incredibly low and gives her the ultimate ultimatum. He whispers that if she tries to dip, he will personally order a hit on her, her dad, and even his own brother Luca. Ara is hyperventilating with pure hatred, but the insane logic of his threat completely crushes any plan to rebel. The lesson we can take from this is wild. Just surviving another day sometimes costs you your entire soul. Left alone to get ready, she just stares blankly in the mirror, watching her own reflection completely shatter. The girl looking back in the mirror is practically a ghost, wiped of her personality, Ara throws on the black dress because she literally has zero fight left in her. Mafia bosses like Ronin, cut straight from Kingpin Vittorio's Insipane playbook, demand total ownership over everything. Cut to 5 minutes to 7, and Ara is standing in the foyer with her heart hammering, right on the dot. Ronin walks down the stairs looking like an elegant movie villain. He stares at her with zero emotion. Very slowly, he pulls out a velvet box holding the most ridiculously massive diamond you have ever seen. Ara is frozen in pure horror as he grabs her hand and forces that heavy rock onto her finger. It is a crazy realization. When you let toxic people define your worth, you basically wear their validation like a heavy chain. Ronin starts laying down the ground rules for tonight with a voice colder than absolute zero. He tells her she is going to smile, she is going to laugh, and she is going to let him touch her to sell the fake romance. She begs for just a tiny bit of freedom, but his stare shuts her down instantly. He pushes her into a massive black sedan, and the entire city disappears behind the dark-tinted glass. The silence in the car is completely agonizing. Ara sits there stiff as a board, nervously twisting that giant diamond, hating how it shines in the streetlights. When she finally asks where they are heading, he completely blanks her. She just has to go play the lovesick girlfriend for his mob friends. Listen to me on this one. Monsters do not just lock you up. They force you to weaponize your own mind against yourself to survive. Listen up, guys. You and I are about to dive into the shadiest underworld drama ever. We open in a velvet-draped VIP dining room where menus never list prices. David, Jennifer, and Marcus are chilling like villains. Then, boom, in walks our boss, Ronin. Look closely at his hand flat on Ara's back. That is not a romantic embrace, bro. That is absolute ownership. Ara is shaking, pasting on a traumatized smile. Across the table, Jennifer hits her with the ultimate death stare, dissecting her like cheap glass before calling their union a bold choice. It is a crazy flex of Mafia dominance. It leaves us with a real lesson. In spaces where people trade their souls for money and power, genuine human warmth is always the very first thing to get iced. The dinner from hell kicks off, and the tension is unreal. They start throwing around massive investment talk, leaving Ara totally out to dry. To cover up her panic, she sips her wine and fakes hollow laughs at Ronin's jokes. When David grills her, she panics, gripping her glass and claiming she is an art student. Then comes the trap. He asks how they met. Her terrified eyes shoot to Ronin, who watches her squirm like a psycho. In desperation, she drags poor Luca into her alibi, anchoring her fake backstory to his tragedy and talking about love at first sight. But Jennifer's savage sneer instantly destroys that fairy tale. It teaches us a brutal truth. When you build your survival strategy on a foundation of lies, you are simply locking yourself inside an elegant prison. That wine tastes like garbage to Ara right now. This dinner is a straight-up nightmare, and her jaw must be aching from faking that smile. Once they leave, Ronin drags her along like she wears an invisible leash. The second those car doors slam shut, her tough act crumbles. She cries, snapping that she feels like a zoo animal on display. Does Ronin care? Nope, not a blink. In the coldest tone ever, he tells her that her personal feelings died the second she surrendered to him. Later, back in her luxury prison, she stares at the mirror. That diamond ring is flashing, totally mocking her. She rips at the metal, tearing her skin, but the ring is stuck. It shows us something real. When you trade away a piece of your soul for safety, you can never buy it back. All right, let's look closer at this brutal moment together. We zoom right in on Ara's bleeding finger, that rock sitting there like a literal curse. Suddenly, without even knocking. Ronan barges in. His dead eyes lock onto her bloody hand, zero sympathy. He casually drops the bomb that the ring is engineered to swell and trap her if she messes with it. Ara screams for him to take it off, but this dude ignores her, rambling about money and investments. When she yells that she is just a PR prop to him, this narcissist does not flinch. He calmly agrees that she is an object. It is super dark, guys. The harsh reality here is pretty plain. The absolute worst monsters rarely hide in the shadows. They just trick you into believing they're twisted. Locked Cage is actually a beautiful palace. Ronan stares at her, sizing her up like a piece of real estate, unbothered by how much she hates him. Ara is straight up vibrating, breaking down in front of a starving wolf. When she begs to know why he did this, the room goes quiet. Then he drops a massive plot twist. He whispers that if he had not claimed her, she would literally be in a grave. Panicking, she demands the truth about Victor Salazar. Ronan's face goes ice cold as he confirms her worst nightmare. She is just living bait. He planned this the second he got her name from Luca. As Ronan leaves, sealing her in the dark, Ara shatters. She collapses, realizing she is a pawn in his sick game. It serves as a huge warning. When we hand over our free will out of fear, we become mere ghosts haunting our own lives. 3 in the morning. The clock is glowing red. Ara is paralyzed, listening to every creepy sound in this empty mansion. Suddenly, her phone buzzes like crazy. She answers, and there is heavy breathing on the line. A gravelly voice casually describes how pretty she is. You can literally see her soul leave her body. The Phantom drops a lethal threat. He will end her father if she disobeys. He exposes Ronan, calling him a fragile narcissist who throws away his toys. Then, the guy drops an evil laugh and reveals his name. Victor Salazar sends his regards. Boom, the line goes dead. She clutches her phone in terror. This teaches us a real-life lesson. Staying silent when a predator is hunting you never protects you. It just leaves the front door wide open for the monsters. Listen, as we unpack this together, you can watch Ara's mind start to snap. Her first instinct is to tell Ronan, but that Mafia brainwashing is working. She knows if she complains, Ronan will see her as a broken toy and toss her in the trash. The camera gives us an overhead shot as she makes the worst choice possible. Pure isolation. Her shaking hands delete the call log. She dives into bed, pulling the blankets up like a barricade. Every shadow looks like a hitman. She tries so hard to feel safe, but the guy protecting her is the exact same dude who put a target on her back. It is a sad look at total isolation. The lesson here is heavy. You can never find genuine safety in the cold arms of the person who put you in danger in the first place. When the sun comes up over the mansion, Ara flips a switch. The midnight fear is gone, and now she is stepping up like a cornered animal ready to fight back. She is absolutely done with Ronan's lies and needs the real truth. Wearing all black, she sneaks down the stairs. She can feel Ronan awake somewhere in the house, plotting his next move. The camera zooms in on her shaking hand as she snatches the keys to a black sedan. Her heart is beating out of her chest. She starts the engine, expecting alarms to blare or Ronan to pop up in the rearview mirror like a jump scare. But nope. The yet metal gates just silently slide open. This brings up a super deep point for us all. Sometimes the absolute scariest traps to escape from are the ones your enemy purposely leaves wide open for you. We get this epic shot from the hood of the car as Ara speeds into the early morning. For 2 seconds, she feels like she can breathe again. The city feels peaceful, but out of pure habit, she drives straight back to her old apartment. Stick with me here, because this is a super relatable mistake. We always run back to our oldest wounds, confusing the comfort of our past pain with actual safety. She turns her phone on, swiping past the angry missed calls from Ronan. Instead, she rings up P.T. Costa, the mob enforcer holding her dad's debts. He picks up sounding hungover, but the second she drops a hint about his little intimidation tactics, the phone goes completely dead silent. In that quiet moment, you can literally hear P.T. realizing his life is officially over. Look at Ara's eyes right here, guys. She is locked in, using her fake engagement as a weapon. She demands the dirt on Vittorio Salazar, and you can hear P.T. sweating through the phone. She hits him with a trap, saying if he breathes a word to Ronan, he is toast. P.T. is stuck between two massive bosses. He cracks and spills the tea. Turns out, Vittorio wants Ronan totally destroyed. You and I need to look at Vittorio for a second. Imagine an old mob king losing his grip on the city because Ronan is stealing his business. For a massive ego like that, losing street cred is far worse than losing money. It shows us a super dark reality. The most dangerous people out there are not the ones chasing cash. They are the ones desperately trying to fix their own shattered pride. Boom. The ultimate plot twist finally drops, and it is insane. Ara is the very first girl Ronan has shown off in public. Vittorio saw this as a weakness and used Ara as bait to totally wreck Ronan mentally. P.T. is literally crying on the phone, telling her to run because she is a dead woman walking. When he hangs up, it feels like all the oxygen leaves the car. Her dad's debt was not the real problem at all. She was doomed the exact second Ronan decided she was a useful prop for his gang war. So suddenly, her phone lights up. It is Ronan. She stares at the screen, letting it ring 3 times, just to feel like she has 1 ounce of control left. This lesson hits hard. True helplessness is not having 0 options. It is realizing every single choice you have leads right into a trap. This phone call is insane. Ara goes rogue, cutting through his brutal interrogation to test her limits. Ronan just gives a flat hum, keeping his psycho energy chillingly steady. He literally uses Vittorio and his death threats as a sick excuse to lock her up. When she breaks down, sick of her golden cage, he straight up denies she is a captive. The gaslighting is wild. But then, major plot twist. The script completely flips. The monster asks her to come back, and he actually drops the word please. That one little word is a massive crack in his Mafia boss armor. Ara jumps on it, demanding an end to his lies. The lesson here is real. Even the scariest people have a weak spot, and sometimes surviving means having the absolute guts to press your thumb right into their open wound. The heavy doors of the study slam shut, and Ara is gasping for air. She just danced with a predator and lived. But look at Ronan now. His tie is undone, and he is slouching with an exhaustion that actually makes him look human. He pours a whiskey, and when Ara demands to know why she got dragged into this nightmare, the dude does not blink. He hits her with the coldest reality check. Desperate people are just easy to control. You and I are going to unpack this together, because this is where the plot gets heavy. He goes silent, acting like a ruined king staring at his broken chessboard. It is a harsh truth to swallow, but sometimes our deepest trauma does not make us special. It just gives toxic people the exact strings they need to easily pull us around. Check out the shadow as Ronan slams his glass down. He is giving off Major Wolf defending his turf vibes. He swears Vittorio cannot touch her inside his fortress. But then Ara drops the bomb about the phone call, and that safe house illusion shatters. Vittorio bypassed the gates to threaten her dad. Paranoia is screaming from her eyes. When Ronan snaps and demands why she kept this secret, she straight up admits she does not trust him at all. Ronan gives a hollow laugh, proving he is just desperate for control, and orders her to sit tight and play her role. But Ara is done being a pawn in this bloody mafia game. The takeaway is huge here, guys. Real strength only shows up the exact second you refuse to let anybody else write the rules for your own survival. Ara pushes for the truth, sounding totally stressed. Ronan lets a heavy silence fill the room so he can take back the upper hand. Then he drops his wild plan. There is an upcoming gala packed with mafia big shots, and he wants to parade Ara right in front of Vittorio. He wants to flex her as his personal property to back the rival off. When Ara snaps back that she belongs to literally nobody, Ronan closes in fast. He towers over her and whispers that she is his in every single way. The deadly vibe in his voice gives her chills, and it hits her. He is completely planning to take out his rival boss. He brushes off her shock and just turns away. It is wild to think about, but sometimes chasing the harsh truth only chains you faster to the exact darkness you were trying to escape. Left alone in that massive office, Ara shrinks down from the heavy vibes in the air. Time slows to a crawl, like the quiet right before a jump scare. She wears a crimson dress that acts like a suffocating armor, hiding how broken she feels inside. She stares into the mirror and does not even recognize the girl looking back. Suddenly, Ronan barges in without a word. Decked out in a black suit, he looks less like a guy and more like a fully loaded weapon. He tries to act like his clenched jaw is just tactical focus, but we know it is his fragile ego. They step into the blinding ballroom lights together. Remember this, guys. The absolute most dangerous battlefields you will ever face in life are usually covered up by fancy clothes and shiny gold. This ballroom is pure intimidation, soaked in golden light and fake whispers. These mobsters trade forced laughs without a care. Ronan keeps his hand locked onto Ara's spine, and you honestly cannot tell if he is protecting her or keeping her on a leash. Ara nails her role, flashing a smile while internally panicking. Then boom, Vittorio walks in. His face just screams elegant evil. The second his dead eyes lock onto her, her blood turns to ice. Her whole body locks up completely. Beside her, Ronan grips her so hard it probably leaves a bruise. The camera zooms in on his blank face as he plots his next move. The big takeaway here: you can run all you want, but you are never going to outrun the dark problems in your life until you turn around and finally confront them head on. Vittorio glides across the room like he owns the place, flashing a creepy smile. Ronan gives him the coldest shoulder ever, starving the guy of the reaction he wants. Then the rival boss turns his eyes onto Ara. When Vittorio reaches out, she clearly wants to run, but Ronan squeezes her spine so hard she has to take his hand. The handshake lasts way too long. Vittorio talks to her like a trophy, basically offering to be a slightly nicer prison for her. Swallowing her panic, Ara gives him a polite, empty answer. Angry that she is not breaking down, Vittorio demands to speak to her alone. Ronan instantly shuts that down with a hard no. Life lesson time. When toxic people start circling you, playing nice and giving a polite smile will never magically turn your cage into a safe space. Look at the insane tension in Ronan's shoulders. He is ready to throw down. By denying Vittorio his mind games, Ronan destroys his ego. He hits him with the ultimate disrespect, dismissing the boss like he is invisible. For a psycho obsessed with power, that is a critical hit. Vittorio chokes out an awkward laugh before slinking into the crowd. Once he is gone, Ara starts shaking violently. She cannot even tell if the trembling is hers or Ronan's. She whispers, asking if he actually has this under control, and his tough guy act finally cracks. He looks down and quietly admits he has no idea. Suddenly a loud scream rips through the ballroom. Just remember, even the thickest emotional armor breaks eventually. Nobody is completely immune to the unpredictable chaos of real life. The illusion shatters as blood ruins the marble floor, setting off a massive panic among the rich snobs. Ronan moves with insane speed, grabbing Ara and dragging her through the stampede. Heavy doors slam shut, throwing the building into lockdown. Ara is having a total panic attack. Stick with me here, because this is where it gets incredibly dark. In the chaos, we spot Luca at ground zero. He is completely covered in red. Look at his eyes. They are totally empty. His brain is breaking from the trauma. He just keeps mumbling that the victim only fell down. It is pure delusion. It shows that when reality gets too dark, our minds will straight up lie to us. Sometimes flat-out denial is the absolute heaviest shield we use to protect our sanity. The dead guy is the lackey who followed Vittorio earlier. The room empties out fast. Ronan grabs Luca by the shoulders, growling, totally desperate for answers. But Luca is checked out, his brain buried under trauma. Surprisingly, Ara is the only one seeing the real picture. This is not a random hit. It is a massive flex of psychological warfare. Her phone suddenly buzzes. She reads the text, and her blood turns to ice. 2 down, 12 to go. For every hour Ronan holds out, another person gets iced. Ara goes completely numb. Ronan rips the phone from her hands, and his face turns straight up demonic. Guys, when you reach life and death, you quickly learn that waiting around for a hero is way more dangerous than stepping up and saving yourself. This is where things go off the rails. Ronan snips the cord on his humanity and slips into his killer persona. Marcus grabs Ara, ignoring her fighting, and drags her into the shadows. Looking back, she watches this messed up tragedy play out. Ronan is consumed by a need for revenge, while Luca is frozen like a broken toy. Vittorio is somewhere just eating up all this chaos. The escape car ride is a crazy blur of screeching tires. Ara checks out mentally, hiding from reality. Back at the massive estate, heavy doors lock her inside what feels like an echoing tomb. The dead silence actually hurts her chest. Look, isolation is never just about physical space. A fancy, golden cage is always going to feel like a cold, dark grave if your own soul is simply begging to be free. Look at this absolute mess, guys. Ara is practically wearing a hole in the floor, her anxiety spiking straight to the moon. Then Ronan casually walks in, looking like he has seen a ghost, and drops the absolute worst stat reveal. Vittorio just packed up 3 more bodies. Ara is literally begging this man to just fold and save the innocent bystanders. But come on, the Don never folds. His empire would crash in seconds. When she tries to guilt trip him over the body count, his cool mob boss aesthetic finally cracks. He snaps, yelling that literally everything he is doing is just to keep her breathing. You and I have probably both made this mistake before, thinking we can micromanage the chaos. The truth is, when ego drives the car, the innocent are always the first ones thrown under the tires. Let us really unpack this massive plot twist together, alright? Ronan is totally glitching out, dropping his unbreakable Mafia boss act and burying his face in his hands like a stressed guy at his breaking point. And Ara, instead of sprinting away from the guy who literally put a huge target on her back, she actually reaches for his hand. Yes, the trauma bond is officially locked in, people. But wait, the universe decides to hand her another massive reality check. Her phone lights up with a literal hostage photo of her dad, looking totally wrecked, with a 6-hour expiration timer attached to his life. Total nightmare fuel. It goes to show a weird but true lesson about life. When our entire reality gets ruined, We tend to cling to the exact same people who caused the blast, mostly because nobody else is around to hold on to. Victor drops his demands like the ultimate villain monologue. He tells Ronan to meet him at Pier 17 or the dad gets sliced into tiny pieces. The tension here is absolute peak cinema. Ara completely blue screens as the guilt hits her like a freight train. She tries to bolt like a panicked deer, but Ronan just yanks her back into his personal space. And here is the craziest vendetta twist. She literally melts into the chest of the guy who started this entire Mafia war. In the dark, Ronan drops a super rare promise, swearing he will keep her dad breathing. And the wild part, she totally buys it without a single second thought. It is a harsh reality check for us all. Sometimes the absolute most toxic lies are the ones we swallow whole, just because we need something to help us survive a brutal situation. Stick with me for this scene. A mafia boss is scary, but a boss catches feelings for a total walking disaster. Ronan knows his cold-blooded reputation is slipping, so he hits the balcony and dials for backup. He completely ghosts his own brother Luca and calls in Dante. Dante struts in an hour later, and the vibe immediately goes sub-zero. This dude has knuckles covered in serious battle scars and walks around like a hungry wolf smelling absolute carnage. He is not even a person anymore. He is just a human rocket launcher waiting for a target. Everyone always talks about how romance turns tough guys into total softies, but honestly, here is the real lesson. In the gritty underground, falling for someone does not make you weak, it just upgrades you to a totally unhinged level of dangerous. Dante just casually leans on the doorframe, checking Ara out like she is an extra in his action movie. He flashes this completely unhinged grin that practically screams pure violence. But guys, the script completely flips right here. Ara actually stops her anxiety shaking. She steps out from behind the Don, tilting her chin up like an absolute boss. The helpless victim era is officially cancelled. Ronan tries to block her, clenching his jaw because he is losing his grip on the situation. Dante just chuckles at her totally reckless main character energy. Then, the trio rolls out to a heavily tinted black sedan locked into this crazy death mission. It is a solid reminder for everyday life. Being brave does not mean you stop being terrified. It just means you decide someone else matters way more than your own comfort zone. The road trip to Pier 17 is giving major funeral vibes. Dante is driving the heavy armored car through the fog, while Ronan is in the backseat running Italian curses and doing the math on this disaster. It is literally just three of them against a squad of geared-up thugs in the dark. The cold air is blasting in, smelling like dead fish and bad choices. Right before they step out, Ronan grabs Ara by the shoulder, going full scary mob boss mode. He demands absolute silence and zero funny business. The streetlights are making him look like a total menace. He needs her to be a perfect robot to survive this, but her hands are vibrating with panic. It teaches us a brutal lesson. You can plan your entire life down to the very last detail, but raw human panic is always going to be the wild card that wrecks the system. This rusty warehouse is giving straight-up horror movie aesthetics. Dante sneaks through a side door like an absolute ninja, while Ronan acts as a giant human shield for Ara. Right in the middle, under a cheap swinging light bulb, her dad is zip-tied to a chair, and there is Victor Salazar, acting like he just secured the victory royale. Victor flashes this extremely toxic smirk and presses a massive hunting blade right at against her dad. He tells Ronan to hand over the entire Mafia empire or else. Ronan does not even blink. He straight up rejects the deal. Right on cue, a whole squad of goons steps out of the shadows. It is a brutal wake-up call about the real world. No matter how much of your own peace you sacrifice to keep things calm, toxic people are always going to keep demanding more from you. Alright guys, this is where the plot absolutely explodes. Victor does not care about taking over the city. He just wants the sick thrill of watching the mighty Don beg on the dirty concrete. But look at Ara, completely ignoring the strict survival rules Ronan gave her. She steps right into the spotlight. She offers to trade her own life for her dad, telling this absolute psycho that she is the premium leverage. Victor is totally amused by this tiny girl trying to pull off a main character sacrifice. He makes the fatal mistake of looking at her for literally one split second. And in the Mafia underground, a single second of lag is an instant game over. It is a wild reminder for anyone carrying too much ego. Arrogant pride will always distract you, while your own downfall is literally swinging right at your neck. The warehouse instantly turns into a chaotic first-person shooter. Dante is sliding through the smoke like a cheat code, wiping out the goons before they even realize what is happening. Victor starts totally panicking and grabs the dad to use as a human meat shield. But Ronan is way too fast. One massive gunshot goes off, and Victor completely loses his shoulder in a red mist. Bleeding on the floor, Victor actually starts laughing and spitting blood, calling Ronan a heartless monster. Ronan aims right for a headshot, totally ready to finish the job. But suddenly, Ara reaches out with her shaky hands and pulls the gun down. She literally saves the Mafia boss from going full dark side. It teaches us something huge. If you become a total monster just to defeat the bad guys, the toxic darkness still wins the ultimate victory. Ronan locks eyes with this trembling girl, breathing heavily, and pulls the biggest plot twist ever. Instead of shooting, he drops the weapon and just absolutely decks Victor with his bare hands. He drags the half-dead dad out into the freezing rain and tosses him in the getaway car while Dante floors it. Fast forward to the Mafia mansion, and it is pure chaos. Medics are swarming the dad, but we are looking right at Ara. Covered in warehouse grime, her legs finally uninstall, and she collapses. Ronan catches her before she faceplants on the marble, whispering that the nightmare is cancelled, but her blank stare proves otherwise. You and I have unpacked this exact drama before, right? Surviving the crazy storm is only 50% of the job. Figuring out how to exist in the messy aftermath is the real struggle. The fairy tale aesthetic is officially deleted. Ara is sitting on the fancy couch, totally spaced out, staring at her hands like she can still feel the glitchy phantom sensation of violence. Ronan slides up like a shadow and hands her some water, trying to reboot her brain. She finally speaks, her voice totally wrecked, asking if her dad is going to make it. And Ronan? Zero emotional support. He just flexes his Mafia wealth, straight up saying he pays the doctors way too much cash to let anyone expire. Talk about a completely cold and transactional vibe. Ara just stares at him, finally realizing she is dealing with a real gangster, not a romantic boyfriend. It is a harsh truth to swallow. You cannot force someone into loving you perfectly. You just have to look at their actual red flags and decide if you are staying. Let us zoom in on the medical wing for the lull-down phase. Ara is hovering over her dad, and his health is practically at zero, totally covered in nasty bruises and medical tape. She whispers that he looks terrible, fixating on the awful cut on his face. He manages a weak smile and jokes that she is the one looking rough. She ignores it, completely numb to her own trauma stats. The doctor starts listing off a terrifying menu of broken bones, and Ara finally runs out of stamina. Her knees give out But Ronan is right there, catching her like a human brick wall. Her dad just looks at her, pushing through the intense pain to apologize for dragging her into this disaster. It hits you right into the feels. Even when a parent is totally wrecked, their primary programming is always going to be protecting their kid from the darkness. Guys, picture this absolute madness. We are in a hospital, the monitor beeping like crazy. The old man is trying to dump his tragic backstory and past addictions. But Ara is just like, not today, bro. She is fully dialed into just keeping him breathing. Then Pops hits her with the ultimate question. Are you seriously marrying the guy who just bailed us out? Ara stares at this massive diamond ring. Honestly, it looks less like a flex and more like a shiny handcuff. I do not know, she whispers. Her dad sighs, saying Ronan treats her like an absolute goddess. Ara steps out into the dark hallway, and there is Ronan, raw dogging a pill like an absolute menace. Victor is gone. He drops the bomb. Simple life lesson here. Love is wild, but it absolutely cannot erase the heavy consequences of your darkest choices. The hallway lights are literally flickering like something out of a horror movie. Ara is shaking, asking what on earth happens now. Ronan does not even blink. He flat out promises to hunt Victor down and finish the job. You stopped me once, he growls, sounding like a total menace. But I will not hesitate again. She steps up, desperate, saying she only stopped him to save his soul and prove he is not the monster everyone claims. But Ronan just hits her with the deadest, emptiest stare you have ever seen. I am that thing, he whispers, totally owning his villain era. He tells her she should absolutely hate him for dragging her into this mess. Listen up, because here is your life lesson. We waste so much energy trying to fix broken people, forgetting that some pieces are just meant to stay shattered. Let us zoom in on this absolutely insane plot twist. Ara looks at him, totally shattered, and drops a bombshell. I do hate you, she whispers. I hate that you played me, but my brain will literally not stop thinking about you. She is shaking, completely terrified by her own toxic feelings. I saw something in your eyes, she says, like you were actually scared. And guys, Ronan finally cracks. The ultimate tough guy admits he was terrified of losing her. The tension here is thicker than concrete. She begs him not to say things he cannot take back. He just stares her down like an absolute boss and says, "What if I do not want to take it back?" Boom, mind totally blown. This leaves us with a wild but true life lesson. Love has a funny way of taking root in the exact emotional wounds we try the hardest to hide from the world. The absolute panic sets in as Ara closes the gap, grabbing him like she is drowning, and he is the only life raft left. You do not know what you are saying, she gasps before crashing her lips into his. For a second, our favorite cold-blooded killer literally malfunctions. Then, the dam totally bursts. He pulls her in with this insane energy, and you can just feel the impending disaster. They finally break apart, both gasping for air. This is a huge mistake, she says. Ronan just goes, probably. Do you even care? No. Guys, they are speeding straight off a cliff with no brakes. We cannot do this, he breathes, gripping her tight. It complicates everything. It gives us a brutally honest life lesson. Sometimes the exact things that keep us alive in our darkest moments are the very things that will destroy us in the light. You and I really need to break down the sheer madness of this scene. Look at how she takes his heavily scarred hitman hands and presses them right over her racing heart. Ara is throwing all her survival instincts straight out the window, looking completely terrified but more alive than ever. Ronan, a guy literally built for nothing but violence, realizes he has just been handed his ultimate weakness. He drops his voice into this terrifying warning, telling her that catching feelings just puts a massive target on their backs. Then he casually threatens to burn the entire city to the ground if anyone touches her. It is the ultimate collision of two totally wrecked lives, which brings us to a major life lesson. Showing true vulnerability takes a terrifying amount of courage that just surviving day to day could never teach you. The camera captures a totally chaotic aesthetic. Papers are flying everywhere, a lamp gets smashed, and sparks fly. This is the official end of their boundaries, but then Ara hits the brakes, pulling back just enough to prove she is still the one in charge. She makes it crystal clear this is pure, raw attraction, not some pathetic thank you for saving her life. For the absolute first time, Ronan drops the tough guy mob enforcer act, and you finally see the broken kid hiding under all that lethal muscle. He is tracing her scars, she is running her hands over his dark tattoos, and they are basically just trying to survive until morning. It leaves us with a solid life lesson. Everyone is out here looking for a safe harbor in the dark, even if we have to build it entirely out of our own broken pieces. Morning finally hits, but do not relax yet, because peace is a total joke in this Mafia world. Ara cracks up laughing when Ronan, the ultimate hitman, admits he has literally zero plan right now. It is a wild crack in his flawless armor. They get like 2 seconds of chill vibes before his phone violently buzzes and ruins everything. We see Ronan read a text from Dante, and the dude instantly turns to stone. Plot twist. Guys, Kingpin Vittorio did not run away at all. Instead, he is pulling in every mercenary he knows to absolutely drown them in violence. Their cozy little safe space is officially cancelled. The core life lesson here is brutally clear. Ignoring a massive problem never makes it go away. It only gives the monster lurking in the shadows way more time to sit back and sharpen its teeth. The shot pulls way back here to show us the real scale of this mess. This is not just a little street beef anymore. Vittorio is literally throwing a massive, bloody temper tantrum to soothe his fragile ego. We watch Ronan go into absolute panic mode, shifting his mob pawns around like a madman. He tries to lock Ara up in this fancy, super secure safe room because he is utterly terrified of losing her. But Ara is absolutely not having it. She drops the helpless victim act on the spot and demands a weapon to join the fight. Her refusal to sit on the sidelines teaches us a massive, undeniable life lesson. You can never actually heal from your deepest trauma if you spend your entire life hiding out in the shadows, running from the exact same monsters who caused it in the first place. Notice how tight this camera angle gets when Ara demands a weapon. We are literally watching the victim level up into the hunter right before our eyes. She looks Ronan dead in the face and completely calls out his controlling behavior, proving his protection is just another toxic cage. They seal the deal with a super intense kiss, basically mourning their normal lives before the bullets fly. Cut to the next scene, and their chill apartment is suddenly a full-blown mob armory. Dante rolls in, dropping heavy duffel bags like an absolute boss. Turns out Vittorio has an insane army waiting for them, because some foolish guard drank too much and spilled the tea. This sets up a perfect life lesson. When your world starts crashing down, taking bold, decisive action is the only real cure for your paralyzing fear. The whole vibe shifts to these icy blues and pitch blacks as our crew decides to take the fight to the boss. Watch Ara strap into that heavy Kevlar vest. She is literally suiting up in emotional armor, and it is completely badass. Ronan pauses for a tense second, his hand hovering over hers, basically giving her one final out to dodge this war. when she flat out rejects the offer. The camera locks onto the cold steel of the gun he hands her. He drops the most chilling advice if ever. She has to entirely switch off her feelings, because hesitating for even a second means getting clipped. The squad rolls out into the dark like phantoms hunting for prey. The major life lesson here hits super hard. Sometimes, surviving the worst parts of life demands that we fully embrace the exact darkness we have been trying to escape. You guys literally cannot blink during this next part. The tension is absolutely through the roof. They pull up to an abandoned slaughterhouse, which is just way too fitting for a creepy villain like Vittorio. Inside the dark SUV, the camera is all up in Ara's business as she flicks the safety of her gun, shaking like crazy. But Ronan leans in and totally flips the script. He tells her the fear is actually a massive flex. It means she is sharp, awake, and ready to throw down instead of freezing up. As the rusted gates appear, the squad steps out into the freezing rain looking colder than ice. Ronan grabs her shoulder and demands she lock eyes with him, forcing her into total focus so she does not mentally crash. The big life lesson: when you are staring pure evil in the face, absolute discipline is your only reliable armor. The break-in is totally tiresome, just like watching a pack of wolves sneaking up on their dinner. Ronan is out here looking like a mob ninja, using tiny wrist flicks to command his squad and dropping the outer guards without a single sound. Once they breach the doors, the place smells like rusty iron and straight-up doom. The background noise completely fades, leaving us listening to Ara basically having a full-blown panic attack. Seeing her start to lose her grip, Ronan just presses his heavy hand flat against her spine. It is this intense, wordless way of saying, "I am right here and you are alive." They sweep through the dark hallways with absolute lethal grace, marching right into the belly of the beast. This leaves us with one epic life lesson. Your mind can survive the absolute worst horrors imaginable as long as you anchor yourself to someone you completely trust. Bro, walk with me right through these heavy doors, because this is where the nightmare goes fully off the rails. The millisecond they hit the top floor, Vittorio's trap violently snaps shut. The lighting shifts, and there is the kingpin, rocking the unhinged smile of the devil himself. Mercenaries pour out of the dark like roaches. Ara totally freezes in absolute shock, but my guy Ronan doesn't even blink. His face is carved from pure stone. Vittorio gloats, making it clear he doesn't give a rip about their empire. He just wants to shatter their souls. Thugs violently rip Ara away, dragging her back while cold gun barrels get shoved against Ronan's skull. Look, here is the real lesson. When the universe violently strips away every illusion of control, the human spirit will always calculate one final, desperate path to survive. The camera violently pushes in on a scene ripped straight out of some modern Greek tragedy. The warehouse air is thick enough to choke on. Ara is just standing there, totally swallowed by shadows. "Let her go," Ronan barks, completely trying to mask the absolute terror clawing at his chest. But Vittorio, this dude literally feeds in control. He flashes this chilling smile. "Why would I do that?" he whispers, physically unable to process genuine emotional attachment. He mocks Ronan, calling him the man with zero weaknesses, before turning his dead eyes to Ara. When she spits out a venomous rejection, Victor violently backhands her. That sickening crack echoes through the room. It serves as a harsh reminder for us all. The most toxic people do not see love as a gift. They just see it as a fatal weakness begging to be exploited. Absolute hell breaks loose in a storm of pure fury. It is like time drastically slows down for the camera. Ara locks eyes with Ronan, beaming him a silent, desperate vibe. Just trust me. We literally watch Ronin's face shift as he clocks her deadly intent, giving her a microscopic nod. Running entirely on feral instinct, Ara savagely drives her elbow straight into her captor's ribs. His grip shatters, and her shaking hand pulls a hidden pistol. Boom! The gunshot totally deafens the room. She misses the flesh but shatters Victor's control. Ronin violently lunges, turning his guard into a broken heap. The camera holds on Ara as she drops, slowly rises, coldly aims, and drops the target for real. Move, she barks, the heavy lesson here. Sometimes in life, true survival forces you to become the exact monster you fear most. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? They are full-on sprinting through the darkness, the air suffocating with panic. Victor's psycho voice rings out like a twisted promise, screaming he will find them. Suddenly, a massive detonation tears the lower levels into confetti, painting the walls fiery orange. What was that? Ara screams. Dante's policy, Ronin spits back. They smash through into the freezing night, but Victor kicks the exit door off its hinges, warped by pure rage. He roars Ronin's name and unloads a round right through his chest. The invincible man crumples against the cold brick. Ara drops to the concrete as his blood pools under the moon. He whispers for her to run, but she refuses. Guys, this is the truth. Real loyalty is never built during cozy times. It is only forged in the blazing fires of our darkest hours. You and I must look closely at this tragic frame together, because it is wild. Vittorio struts through smoke like some twisted mafia god, convinced he is immortal. He raises his piece, soaking up the sick thrill of ending their story. But bro, the camera catches the exact millisecond that Ara completely deletes her moral hesitation. She raises her gun and absolutely dumps a fatal round straight into Vittorio's chest. He hits the floor, but his ego remains. We literally watch this dude smile as he bleeds out, treating his own murder like he just won a game of chess. Dante finally rolls up, helping Ronin drag Ara out as the building caves in. The flames devour the theater of Vittorio's cruelty. It teaches us a brutal truth. Absolute, unchecked pride will always blind a person right up to the exact second of their own inevitable destruction. The getaway car is just suffocatingly silent, with street lamps washing over Ara's totally catatonic face. She is just staring at the crimson disaster on her shaking hands. Vittorio's blood is literally mixed with Ronin's. When Ronin tries to offer some weak comfort, her voice slices right through the quiet. She actually took a life. The camera lingers on her dead eyes as she drops a massive bombshell. To save him, she would pull the trigger all over again. Back at the giant estate, medics patch up their physical damage while their mental health rots. Luca bursts in and pulls her into a desperate hug. But when she whispers her dark sin, his entire body goes rigid. Crushing guilt floods his eyes. It is a devastating reality check. When you drag people you love into your toxic mess, you can never wash the stain off their innocent hands. Guys, you have to see the framing here, because it is absolutely wild. Ronin is wrapped up in bandages, totally stripped of his usual mob boss armor. He actually pitches the idea of them running away to build a new life together. We zoom in on Ara, and you can see the exact second she realizes the innocent girl she used to be is completely gone. She is a new person now, forged in this toxic bond of shared trauma. Without dropping a single tear, she just accepts this totally twisted reality. They lock eyes across the room, basically sealing a doomed Mafia pact. And honestly, it leaves us with a heavy life lesson. When you back someone into a corner with zero options, their heart will eventually find a sick kind of comfort, even in the absolutely most destructive environment imaginable. The next morning looks so peaceful with the sun hitting the estate, but do not let that fool you. Trauma is a stubborn ghost and Ara is getting haunted. Vittorio is literally a cold corpse, but his shadow is completely suffocating her. The camera cuts to her violently thrashing in sweat-soaked sheets. Every time she shuts her eyes, the audio flips to a deafening heartbeat, and Vittorio's bloody smile flashes right in her face. Meanwhile, Ronan is calmly scrubbing all the forensic evidence like a machine, just watching her break down from a distance. It hits us with a really dark life lesson. The very act of burying a terrible secret will just slowly eat away at the foundation of your sanity until you are absolutely nothing but a hollow shell. 3 in the morning, and the vibes are totally grim. Ara looks like a ghost standing in the harsh shadows of the study, completely drained from zero sleep. She finds Ronan drinking his demons away under a dim desk lamp, surrounded by Mafia files. She breaks down and asks him the ultimate question: does the guilt ever actually fade? Ronan casually drops the story of his very first hit at 19. He mentions the violent sickness that hit him right after, but now his eyes are pitch black, totally dead of any regret. He stares at Ara, fully knowing she was never built for this underworld madness. Here is a massive life lesson: trying to force a deeply gentle heart to carry the massive burdens of a hardened sinner will only result in totally destroying it from the inside out. Ronan does not hold back, tearing away whatever is left of her innocence. The room gets super icy as he reminds her that she chose to step into this blood-soaked mafia life. Ara hugs her arms, voice shaking as she points out how insane it is that she took a life while the clock keeps ticking like normal. Ronan does not give her a hug. Instead, he hands her a monster's survival guide: stuff the guilt in a box and keep running until you feel completely numb. You can literally see the exhaustion of that mindset scarred all over his body. She begs to know if turning into a ghost is even worth it. It brings up a deeply true life lesson. Every single time we choose to numb our darkest pain, we permanently kill off a piece of our ability to feel any genuine, pure joy. Stick with me here, guys, because this is where the tragedy really sinks in. Ronan genuinely believes murdering her conscience is a fair trade to keep her breathing. While Ara is drowning in panic, the cops finally show up. Sirens are flashing all over the estate, but Ronan just slips his sociopath mask on and drops an absolutely flawless alibi. The second the cops leave, his crazy wealth kicks into overdrive. High-paid lawyers flood the mansion, basically deleting the crime from reality. Ara watches this insane flex of mob power from the stairs like a ghost. And honestly, it teaches us a really bitter life lesson. All the money and influence in the world can sweep your darkest crimes under the rug, but they can never buy you a single peaceful night of rest. Any normal person would sprint away from this mafia nightmare, but the camera catches Ara's terrifying level up. She stands there, totally loyal to her mob boss protector. She is embracing the dark side now. The scene shifts to a bright psychiatric ward that Ronan's dirty money paid for. Ara's dad is slumped in a wheelchair, completely wrecked by years of addiction. He looks up at her with helpless victim eyes trapped in Ronan's golden cage. But guys, when Ara opens her mouth, that soft pleading daughter voice is gone. She stares him down with ice in her veins and ruthlessly reads him the riot act. It leaves us with a crazy life lesson. When faced with deep trauma, we either let our pain totally destroy our lives, or we forcefully choose to weaponize it. You need to watch this moment closely, because the total wreckage of her life is on full display. The camera lingers on her dad, looking totally defeated. That one brutal second of clarity proves Ara is fully the ball whale. When she breaks down inside her tinted car, do not get it twisted. She is not crying from sadness. She is crying because she realized her violent mafia mindset might be the only cure for her broken family. We pan over to Luca watching her ice over, realizing her innocence is officially dead. He feels incredibly guilty, thinking he helped build this cage. But here is the absolute hardest life lesson we ever have to swallow. Surviving an endless nightmare almost always requires you to turn into the exact monster you spent your entire life running away from. The scene cuts to a super dark room where Arika steps right up to Luca. She is totally owning her villain era now. She tells him she walked into this mess on her own, her voice completely losing that old shaky vibe. Luca is standing there super stiff, choking on his own guilt, and warns her that Ronan is going to push her right off the deep end. Ara does not even blink. She admits the madness is crazy, but she is choosing it anyway. The camera zooms in on her chilling, empty face. A few nights later, she wakes up dripping in a panic's sweat from old trauma. And who does she instantly run to? The exact mafia predator who ruined her world. It teaches us a wild life lesson. A familiar hell will always feel much safer to a deeply wounded soul than an unknown heaven ever could. Being totally isolated really messes with your head. For 20 straight days, we watch her sitting alone in the cold light, literally scrubbing her skin raw to feel clean again. The camera shakes along with her hands as she finds a hidden flash drive in Ronan's office. Curiosity takes over, and she plugs it in. Boom! Vittorio's smug face takes up the whole screen, acting like a literal god. He happily spills his twisted plot to break Ronan by finding a human weakness and exploiting it. The total zero empathy look in his eyes will give you major chills. Watching this drop, we learn a massive life lesson. The elite monsters, pulling the strings in the shadows, never see us as real human beings. They only view us as fragile locks just waiting to be picked apart. We literally watch a masterclass in manipulation play out on the monitor. Vittorio breaks down his psycho methods like it is nothing, while the camera locks hard onto Ara. You can see the exact microsecond her entire reality just explodes. Vittorio brags about how he weaponized her dad's debts to trigger her panic, forcing her to run straight into Ronan's arms. She was never a mafia partner, guys. She was just a lab rat used as mob bait. Every single desperate choice she made was totally rigged from day one. Her eyes look incredibly hollow under that screen glow. Then, the heavy door swings open, and Ronan is just standing there in the dark. The painful life lesson here hits so hard. The very hands offering you a warm shelter from the storm are usually the exact ones that violently summon the rain. You have to stick around for this blow-up, because the glass completely shatters here. The camera pushes in on Ara, and even though she is whispering, her pure rage floods the room. She throws this disgusting truth right in Ronan's face. Naturally, he immediately plays the protective savior card, which is a classic move for a toxic control freak. But the blindfold is fully off now. She shakes with anger and hurls that flash drive right at his chest. She sold her soul and murdered someone, believing she was making her own boss moves. In reality, she was just blindly reading a script written by evil men. The absolute hardest life lesson we ever learn is this. Sometimes the total freedom we fight so desperately to win is actually just a slightly larger cage built by someone claiming to love us. Ronan gets super defensive, and the energy of the room shifts instantly. The lighting gets softer as he drops a totally insane confession. He swears his cold manipulation actually morphed into real love. He could have bailed after Vittorio was taken out, but he stuck around because she became his only anchor in this underworld. For an icy mob boss, that is a massive thing to admit, but the camera stays glued to Ara, and she is an absolute brick wall. When he begs her to trust him, she stares blankly at a total stranger. They use a wide shot, showing the huge physical distance between them, perfectly mirroring her destroyed trust. She demands space, finally taking a real step toward independence. Here is a quiet life lesson. A beautiful apology can never magically unburn a bridge once the match is officially struck. Let's unpack this entire mess together. The camera zooms in on Ara's trembling hands as she frantically throws her stuff into a bag. It is a literal textbook trauma response. Her body is screaming to escape the cage, but look super closely at that ring on her finger. It is not moving. She mutters some excuse about it being stuck, but bro, we all know the tea. The mental chokehold is way stronger than any piece of jewelry. Downstairs, these crazy thick shadows stretched out where Ronan is just lurking. As she walks past, he softly confesses his love, and it hits her like a full-speed truck. It is a masterclass in manipulation from a dude who knows how to break her. She drives off into the night, but her eyes are glued to the rearview mirror. The sad reality is, we almost never walk away from a toxic cage without staring back at the lock. The camera slowly pans through Luca's apartment, and honestly, the vibes are absolutely depressing. It is this sterile, empty space that feels like a literal waiting room for ghosts. Luca just sits there in the dark, the ultimate poster child for collateral damage, trying to survive by staying invisible. Meanwhile, for 3 entire weeks, Ara is just wasting away in this heavy, numb funk. Food untouched, dark circles, looking crazy. She's going through literal withdrawals, totally starved for the insane adrenaline of Ronan's violent world. Then, her phone blows up. It is her dad, frantic, screaming that Ronan is tearing the entire city apart just to find her. She seeks comfort from a broken man who is just as addicted to the drama. The harsh reality of trying to heal is that sometimes stepping away feels exactly like you are bleeding out. Through the crackling phone, her dad's voice is literally breaking. He paints this picture of Ronan being completely shattered without her, and boom, this is exactly where the trap violently snaps shut. Her dad acts as an unwitting wingman for Ronan's obsession, swearing that dangerous men are not lying when they look ready to burn the whole world down. And Ara? She just eats it up, quietly romanticizing all that massive red flag destruction. Cut to day 21. She is wandering her old university halls like a ghost. The camera pulls way back as she freezes in front of this intense Caravaggio painting. She is staring at it, seeing her own soul violently ripped between the light and the dark. An old professor steps up, shattering the silence. You see, life has a really funny way of forcing us to stare directly into the mirror when we try to hide. Stick with me here, because this gallery scene carries the absolute emotional payload of the whole story. The professor drops some heavy tea, pointing out that the light in the painting does not wash away the darkness. It just exposes the creepy monsters hiding inside it. The camera gets right up in Ara's face as she realizes she is staring at her own fractured mind. Fast forward to day 28, and the tension is physically suffocating. Luca finds her awake at 2 in the morning, spiraling in a panic loop. She admits her absolute worst fear. Walking away means dying alone, but going back to Ronan means permanently flatlining her soul. Luca just repeats Ronan's twisted Mafia rule. You never choose what is right, you only choose what you can stomach. Sometimes survival is not about being good. It is just finding a way to live with bad choices. Luca looks dead at her and asks the ultimate million-dollar question. What can she actually live with? Time basically stops as Ara takes a super dark inventory of her wrecked soul. The ring that refuses to budge, the ringing echo of that fatal gunshot, the crushing weight of the actual human life she ended. Guys, you have to notice the terrifying shift in her posture right here. The violence does not even make her sick anymore. It has officially soaked deep into her bones, and she makes her toxic choice, dialing Marcus and stepping right back into the Mafia hierarchy. When she walks up to the massive estate, the lighting goes freezing cold. Inside, she finds Ronan looking pathetically small, totally drained by his bruised ego. It forces us to swallow a haunting truth. The monsters we run from rarely look scary when crying over broken reflections. The exact second Ronan spots her, his entire body violently flinches. It is this brilliant micro-expression of hypervigilance caught in a crazy tight close-up. Ara drops the words that permanently seal her fate, finally admitting she literally cannot exist without his toxic energy in her life. When she tells him she loves him, the tragedy is officially locked in. We are watching the ultimate final boss level of a trauma bond. She willingly hands her beating heart right back to her captor. Ronan slowly closes the gap, actually trembling, and cups her face in this masterclass of calculated vulnerability. He apologizes for playing Vittorio's cruel games. Vittorio treated people like disposable chess pieces, whereas Ronan rigged the entire board just to trap her. The saddest lesson? It is crazy how fast we accept a warm apology from the fire that burned us. Let us break down who is actually pulling the strings in this insanely tense room. The lights are super dim, catching Ara shaking as she literally begs for zero secrets. Her voice drops to a desperate whisper, clawing for a crumb of control. Their vibe is dangerously raw after ghosting each other for so long. Get this plot twist. Ronan gently offers to slide that metal ring right off her finger, giving her an out. But nope, she totally refuses. She turns the literal symbol of her cage into a twisted badge of freedom. The lesson here is brutal, guys. We often convince ourselves we chose the toxic path just so we do not have to admit we are completely trapped. Sometimes the human brain cooks up a gorgeous lie simply because the absolute truth is way too heavy to lug around. Ronan literally laughs out loud, the sound echoing off the stone walls. It actually sounds warm, purely designed to yank her right back into his toxic orbit. They spend the whole day mirroring each other, spinning through the honeymoon phase of a violently dark cycle. Then comes the shocker. Night falls, and he drops a tiny piece of metal into her shaking hand. Boom, the key to his private safe. He hands her the keys to his entire underworld empire, and she tragically thinks this means she is safe. Fast forward 3 months to this super sketchy wedding. Her dad is in the back, 90 days sober, but the camera is locked on Ara, dropping a massive truth bomb on us. A golden cage is still a cage, even if the mob boss lets you hold the keys. You and I have to look at this frame together, because it is wild. The crew is gathered, totally normalizing a human tragedy. Luca stands there as the best man, literally swallowing his tears and burying his loyalty deep down. As Ara and Ronan swap vows, you realize there are 0 physical chains left. The lock is completely inside her head now. Her dad gives her a massive hug, whispering how proud he is that she survived. The irony is sickening. He is hyping up his daughter for surrendering to the exact Mafia boss who ruined her. Later in their dark bedroom, Ronan asks if she has regrets. She straight up says no. It leaves us with a brutal lesson. The absolute strongest prisons in life are built the second we start believing we actually belong inside them. A whole year drops off the map, hitting us with the ultimate tragedy. Ara is chilling in the morning light, tracing the massive scars on Ronan's chest. She has hardwired her brain to accept his possessive mob boss energy as a twisted form of love. Outside, she watches her sober dad playing fetch in their massive Mafia garden. It looks peaceful, but completely masks ruined soul. She knows she is terrified, twisting her mind into pretzels just to survive this toxic drama. Yet she actually calls this absolute panic her happy ending. Life serves up a terrifying reality check here. When you spend way too much time trapped in the dark, you will eventually convince yourself the shadows are warm, just because you forgot what the sun looks like. We absolutely need to look past this fake suburban peace. They are standing in this gorgeous garden, ignoring the blood and Mafia terror that paid for it. Ara zones out, thinking about the innocent college girl she used to be. That student is long gone, replaced by a cold ghost who does not even blink at a shootout. Then comes the massive plot twist. Ronan casually hands her a velvet box with a heavy brass key to his main office. He is playing three-dimensional chess, trapping her by handing over the ultimate illusion of boss-level power. Life drops a massive truth bomb on us here. The absolute most dangerous traps never violently snap shut on your leg. They just quietly pull out a chair and offer you a prime seat at the table. Ronan literally waited an entire year to hand over that key, calculating the exact second to make her starve for his validation. When she steps into that dim office, she finds a single framed photo. It is a shot of her laughing at a fancy gala with Luca. Poor Luca, still stuck working for the mobsters who broke him. Then Ronan slides out of the shadows like a total villain, dropping a crazy confession. He admits that specific photo was the exact moment he decided he was going to own her. Listen, this is 0% romance. This is a top-tier predator admiring his trapped prey. The ultimate lesson is never to confuse a toxic obsession for real love. Tears well up in her eyes, and she is actually moved by this unhinged confession. The lock on her mind just clicked completely shut. Ronan looks down with a smug smirk, straight up admitting he loves knowing he can still break her composure. It is a terrifying obsession with absolute control. Yet, Ara leans right into it, gaslighting herself that Mafia violence is just the tax they pay for quiet mornings. 6 months later, the vibe shatters. Her phone blows up at 3 in the morning. Her dad is completely wasted and sobbing. Ronan drives her through the neon streets, his face looking like stone. He parks and just watches her run straight into the nightmare. He does zero to help, letting her spin out in her endless trauma. The hardest family lesson here is brutal. Simply outrunning the fire does not heal your burn wounds. Surviving physically means absolutely nothing if your soul is still rotting from the inside out. Even in the pouring rain of her dad hitting rock bottom, Ara gently holds him. Boom, 2 whole years vanish. She walks across a stage to grab her degree, but plot twist, she does not even want a career. She is desperately clinging to the ghost of the normal girl she used to be. Out in the crowd, Ronan sits like a statue, hiding his eyes behind dark shades. Luca is miles away, sending flowers because he cannot face the mob syndicate that ruined his life. After the ceremony, Ronan pulls her close, whispering that all the bloodshed just leveled her up. But here is the raw truth. Surviving massive trauma does not make you a superhero. It just drastically lowers your standards for what you will tolerate. She thinks she is finally free, but she really just hung nicer curtains inside her own cage. We are going to unpack this insane villain origin story together, you and I. The The camera sweeps over a gorgeous dinner where Ara is chilling with her new Mafia family. Her dad, Teresa, Dante, and Marcus are all cracking jokes, completely ignoring the blood on their hands just to get through dessert. Later, the music drops out. Ara steps onto the freezing stone terrace, staring at the glowing city. Ronan shadows her every move. He softly asks if she misses the pure, innocent girl she used to be. She looks back with these dead, ancient eyes and drops a total nuke. She admits she cries for that girl in her sleep, but she would never actually go back. The lesson here hits incredibly hard. When trauma cuts deep enough, it stops being a bad memory and fully mutates into your entire personality. Ara stares over the balcony, gaslighting herself into believing her frozen heart is just a tactical shield. This illusion of control is how the brain survives a nightmare. When Ronan wraps his arms around her, she leans into the monster who destroyed her, confusing her numbness for inner peace. 3 years after Vittorio got flatlined, ending his vendetta, a clueless rival tries to flex on Ronan, but Ronan does not blink. Plot twist: Ara walks straight into the rival's office alone. Standing under those harsh lights with a deadpan face, she calmly details exactly how they are going to delete him. It is bone-chilling to watch. The lesson is super grim. If you stare into the absolute darkest abyss long enough, you eventually figure out exactly how to bite back. The rival folds like a cheap lawn chair under her death stare. When Ara gets back, Ronan hits her with a slow, terrifyingly proud smile. He whispers that he never actually broke her. He just unlocked her true Mafia potential. It is a brilliant, vicious lie. Later, tracing her jawline, he tests her. He asks if she wishes they had met doing something normal in a safe life. Ara shakes her head instantly. She calls normal people weak, fully rejecting the concept of a healthy relationship. She rocks their shared trauma like a designer brand, swearing she belongs in the absolute fire with him. The wildest tragedy in life is that broken people will always hunt for comfort in broken things. They stare at the absolute wreckage of their own souls and proudly call it a masterpiece. 5 whole years evaporate. We catch Ara standing in the grimy alleyway where this entire nightmare kicked off. The street lights are flickering above her. Victims do this all the time, showing up at the crime scene trying to mentally rewrite their worst memories. She looks straight at Ronan and drops a heavy truth bomb. Her sheer terror of him was the exact spark that made her fall in love. She is still terrified, not of dying, but of losing the insane Mafia empire they built. Ronan steps close, his gold wedding band flashing in the light, stamping her as permanently taken. That night, sleeping against his chest, her old dreams of creating art are totally wiped out. Life teaches us a brutal final lesson. The human mind has a strict storage limit. Eventually, the monster sleeping in your bed will completely overwrite all the beautiful art inside your soul. Alright guys, let us set the scene. It is the crack of dawn, cold blue light creeping in. Ara wakes up from a wild dream and turns to watch Ronan sleeping like a baby. Now, you and I know the massive, twisted plot twist here. This guy absolutely broke her down and owns her life, but her mind is so scrambled. She actually calls this nightmare her salvation. She gets up, walking barefoot to the window, staring at these massive iron gates looking like black teeth in the fog. But listen, those bars are not keeping the rival mobs out. Oh no. They are locking her completely unhinged delusion safely inside the mansion. It is totally wild how far people will go to ignore walking red flags. Just a quick life lesson for you. The most dangerous lies out there are the ones we whisper to ourselves, just to survive the dark. Just watch her gliding through these marble hallways like she runs the joint. Ara seriously looks around and sees her own Mafia kingdom, completely blind to the fact that Ronin is pulling every single string. She used to be a sweet art student, and now she is out here claiming that real beauty only comes from absolute chaos. She leans into his arms, totally eating up his calculated affection. Flash forward a few years, someone asks how a terrified hostage became a ruthless crime boss, and she is ice cold. She literally rewrote her own nightmare into a triumphant villain origin story. It is absolutely wild to witness, but it leaves us with a heavy truth. Sometimes, the human brain will invent the craziest fiction just to survive a reality that is entirely too messed up to handle. The camera zooms right in as her fingers trace a faded scar on her collarbone. This right here is her ultimate defense mechanism. Ara is out here claiming her total descent into the underworld was a boss move, a conscious choice to finally live on the edge. She straight up believes being broken and rebuilt by a literal mob boss made her untouchable, ready to dish out the exact same violence. But, guys, the reality check is completely brutal. Ara never found herself in that darkness. Her entire original personality was completely wiped out, replaced by a cheap knockoff version of her own captor. Every single scar she flexes is really just a permanent receipt from the man who built her shiny cage. Remember this simple life lesson, folks. Real strength is never about losing your absolute soul just to love the person who broke you into pieces.